Ladies and gentlemen, we do thank you very much for your attention, and now we invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the
Welcome to our top travel destinations. I am your host, Kevin Flanagan. I have been editor of the weekly travel news column in the Sunday Independent and the Fine Wine and Food Guide, and I am here to use my decades of experience to help you know exactly where to stay, eat, drink, shop, and explore when visiting the world's top travel destinations. So sit back and enjoy the wonders of travel as we take off on our magical journey together. Welcome to the top travel destinations. This week we are visiting an incredible gem, the city of Ghent. This is in the municipality of the Flemish region of Belgium. It is not as famous as its brother town, which is not that far down the road, Bruges, which was immortalized in that incredible movie. But this has almost more to offer. In the late Middle Ages, Ghent was actually the largest and richest city in Northern Europe. It had 50,000 people in 1300. It was the biggest city in Europe north of the Alps after Paris. It was bigger than Moscow. And up to 65,000 people lived within the city walls. And there are some real gems to see. The Belfry, the towers of St. Bavo's Cathedral, St. Nicholas's Church. This is a city that has been totally preserved, unlike most other cities in Europe. All the wars somehow sidestepped it. So the actual fabric of this medieval city is intact, which gives it a mystery and an atmosphere second to none. There are lots of extraordinary things about Ghent. It's surrounded by some of these famous principalities, Athens, Destodon, Drogden, and you will arrive at Ghent, usually by taking a plane to Brussels, and there you will have a very short train ride, an hour or so, to St. Pieter's station in Ghent. Very easy to get tickets, e-tickets, book online. It's such a small city that you can actually walk to your hotel. I was there with my two grandkids, Kuba and Maya. Kuba was 9, Maya was 7, and we stayed at the monasterium. Now, this was an old monastery. My two grandkids were not at all happy that they were staying in a monastery until they got to know it. And then it had its own sort of charm, an extraordinary place. All of these details will be in the fact sheet that accompanies this particular podcast if you want to check up and look at some of these destinations and details for yourself. What I would definitely recommend is get a city car. This gives you access to museums and attractions, the boat tour, even the amazing Mystic Land, the Ghent altarpiece. If you're interested in bikes, maybe use the bike rental system, which is really second to none. More of that a little bit later. This is what we did. Our monasterium hotel was literally a 5-minute walk from the old city. You can walk around the old city. It's very, very compact. And as I say, totally unchanged from 700 years ago. The kids were hungry after we arrived midday. And one of the big things to have when you get to a Belgian town like Ghent is waffles. They're second to none. And after we'd had our waffles and I'd enjoyed a glass of Belgian beer, which is very difficult to beat, believe me, we did the boat trip. Now, this is really extremely enthralling. 40 minutes. It's right in the centre, near the main bridge where the Waffle House was, and you'll get to see the three towers of Ghent, the castles, the ancient port, the guild halls. I'd really recommend it. They also lay on different boats with different languages, and the guy who steers the boat is your guide, and they were very, very funny, actually. We were lucky. The sun was shining, and soon evening came, and we tried a local restaurant called La Bomba. Again, details in the fact sheet. There are certain things that you will want to try when you go to a Belgium city like Ghent. The asparagus is a huge thing. It's not grown all the year round, and it can be a little bit more expensive if you eat this, as we refer to, white gold, out of season. But the best way to try it, I would say, is the Flemish style with scrambled eggs, butter and oil. Yum, yum, yum. There's some other foods that we did try that night. Stomp, this is a typical meal of mashed potato mixed with vegetables, and you can have this with meat. They have extraordinarily good sausages. Then we tried some of the Ganda ham. This is the Belgium equivalent of Serrano in Spain. You can have this with the Belgian mustard, which really can take the head off, but I like the mustard. And then there's another dish that you should definitely try called waterzool. This is a stew. Originally, the main ingredients was fish because fish was plentiful in Ghent, which is on a main river and just down from the sea. And the dish is now prepared with other meats or chickens, and there's vegetables. The kids weren't so mad about it, and I think one of them ended up having a pizza, but there you go. We did make an effort to try the local food. Now, the local beer is far easier to get your taste buds around, that is for sure. And Ghent's famous for its local breweries. They've many small microbreweries, and you will really be able to taste some fabulous beer. There's even a very good city walking tour which visits some of the breweries, and there's a couple of places that we poked our head into, a couple of bars, Artfeld, Hal 16 and Grut. This again gave you a sense of the local wonderful beers. But I have to warn you, beware of the cyclists. We were nearly taken out numerous times, and particularly Maya, who likes to skip and jump and do cartwheels, she came very close to having a near-death experience with a cyclist. The reason being that Ghent has the largest designated cycling area in Europe. There's 400 kilometres of cycle paths. There's 700 one-way streets where bikes are allowed to go against the traffic. It boasts the only first cycle boulevard where cars are considered guests and must travel behind the cyclists. How much fun is that? My son, who is a keen cyclist, would love it. But the reason we had come, dear listener, to Ghent is for me to continue my job of sharing with my grandchildren my love of ballet and art, all things artistic. And the centerpiece of Ghent is the Ghent altarpiece, the so-called adoration of the mystic lamb. This really is possibly, and some of my friends who are art historians would consider this the single greatest work of art that has ever been created by man. I'm not joking. It's a very large, a very complex 15th century polyptych altarpiece, which means there are many, many folding layers and different size panels, all showing this brilliant iconography of the mystic lamb and Adam and Eve and the two founders who paid for the whole thing because there was incredible wealth. There was some really rich equivalent of today's billionaires lived in Ghent and made vast fortunes, and they wanted to have this art, and they engaged the brothers Hubert and Jan. Hubert died sadly, and Jan finished it off, and I would go there just to see this. I studied art history, as you may know from my other podcasts, and this was a pilgrimage. Now, I have to say, a little bit worried that the grandkids may not have my academic interest in all things art history, but the Ghent altarpiece is surprisingly brilliant in the way it copes with people who may not be art fanatics. When you go down to the entrance of the crypt, where the main painting you pay to see it, you can get an AR tour, an audio-visual tour, using a Microsoft HoloLens 2 headset. Now, this is a very large, quite cumbersome headset, and the kids have to wear the same thing too. But I have to say, it was incredible. The original Bishop Antonius Trist, who welcomes you as a hologram, a 3D person. And he tells the story of the cathedral through the centuries. He stands over this physical model, and you go about with a bell ringing, and you guide everything with your eyes. And when you look at the bell, it rings and takes you to the next station. I have to say, for me, the height of it and the best part was entering Jan van Eyck's original studio and seeing him and his students and his helpers prepare the colours. They also were chatting to the two donors who had spent this king's ransom on this extraordinary piece of art. And then you go upstairs and you see the work itself, but you've been prepared. And such was the wonder of this hologram that my two grandkids threw off the headsets when the kids' version was over and said, "We want to see the long version." And so we went and persuaded the powers that be to give us another go, but this time the longer go, and they watched the whole thing. So I think I can give myself a pat on the back. The grandkids know about the Ghent altarpiece, and when you get upstairs, though sadly the altarpiece itself is behind glass because it's been much attacked over the years. Hitler even stole it. The Louvre stole it. It has a very checkered history, and one panel is totally lost. So there's a book in that and a film in that. And it was rediscovered by the Monuments Men. You may have seen that movie. There's a rich tapestry of history surrounding this, possibly the greatest work of art. So I would really, without being snobbish, suggest you go to Ghent and definitely see the Ghent altarpiece. Now, in the afternoon, we had the opposite. We had a sort of a Disney experience, but in a 13th century castle. I kid you not. The castle of the Count is absolutely mind-blowing. It's a 12th century building that is completely intact, and because of the wonder of the fact that Ghent has never suffered badly at the hands of bombers, war, famine, it's intact. Now, it has this unique collection, particularly of torture equipment. And I have to say, the best thing about it all was this audio-visual treat translated into English. And it was voiced by the Flemish comedian Wouter de Prez. And he takes you around the castle, and you can't help but laughing. He tells you the antics of the king. He tells you the antics. He tells you the terrible cruelty, the casual cruelty that went on in the 13th century, where you were dunked if the neighbours said you were a witch, and then if you managed to go down, that meant you were actually innocent. But of course, by then you were usually drowned. It was very funny the way he described it. He also described how one of the kings came back and found his wife with a lover, another knight, and bet the lover and made this lover die over 48 hours in front of his wife, and got such a guilty conscience about this murder, this blood on his hands, that he went off to the Crusades, survived the Crusades, came back, remarried, and had possibly, we'll never know, a very good last few years. The other thing I loved about this castle was it had this book that the kids had to find a symbol, this sort of cartoon character. And they went berserk trying to find this character, and we eventually did find it lurking in a most inhospitable part. Just be careful of the ramps, because you have these ramps with no railing and a 40-foot drop. So I have to say my heart leapt into my mouth on several occasions when Maya cartwheeled towards destruction, and we managed to pull her back at the very last second. That evening, we had the most amazing meal at Eat Love Pizzas. If you ever go to Ghent, go here. It is trendy. It is tasty. It does fantastic cocktails. It has everything about this civilized, sophisticated city. And that's how I would describe Ghent. Civilized, sophisticated, and fun. The food is brilliant. The local delicacies are superb. The people are very welcoming. And I just thought we all had a 5-star experience. I would really strongly recommend that you visit Ghent. You go and have the horrors of the castle, the sublime art of the mystic altarpiece, and some fabulous food like Eat Love's Pizza, trying the local dishes and the fabulous local beer. You, my friend, will have a ball.